Cupcake, and welcome to a review of X-Wing 2nd Edition by Fantasy Flight Games. If you're a longtime follower of ours, you already know that I love Star Wars, and I especially love the game X-Wing. I've been playing since 2012 when I picked up an advanced copy at Star Wars Celebration 6, and I've been a huge fan ever since. So it may come as a surprise to you that I actually had a fairly negative reaction to FFG's announcement of a 2nd edition, mainly because of how they said they were going to do the conversion. Over the last 6 years, I've built up quite a collection, and their conversion path, should I convert 1-to-1, is absurdly expensive. The only thing keeping me from jumping into a Starlock pit was their previews about changes to the game itself, and which I saw enough to keep me tentatively optimistic, and then it may also be worth at least a partial conversion to play the new edition. So I decided to at least get the first wave and see how it stacks up against my beloved 1st edition. We're going to start by taking a closer look at the new components. This isn't an unboxing per se, there are already plenty of those online, and instead we're going to focus on a compare and contrast between the two editions. So let's get started. First, the dice and range ruler have not changed, which is great, especially in regards to dice. Now let's take a look at the ship card. As you can see, the basic stats are unchanged, and they've introduced the new force points for some of the pilots. Those along with the shields now have tokens that have an active and inactive side, which can be toggled by various game effects. Noticeably absent are the upgrade bar and the squad building points. That's because all squadron building will be done with a living and evolving set of points controlled by the smartphone app, the online squad builder, or the downloadable points list. They've also introduced a quick build system where players can construct squads using pre-built combinations of pilots and upgrades that have been assigned a threat level. So for example, if you were playing a threat level 5 game, you could take Luke and Red Squadron Veteran with the options listed. Another key change is the explicit indication of the firing arc of the primary weapon. This is important because the 360-degree arc is no longer used and has been replaced with a rotate action and turret arc indicators. For example, the YT-1300 has a double arc indicator for its primary weapon. When firing a turret weapon, the player chooses one of their turret arcs from which to make the attack. To turn the turret, they use the rotate action. This is interesting, and it adds a level of nuance to the game where players now have to consider several factors when employing these weapons as opposed to 1st edition. Another addition to the ship card is the introduction of linked actions and red actions. Linked actions are those that trigger follow-on actions, while red actions give the ship a stress token in the same way as red maneuvers. For example, performing a barrel roll with the attack shuttle, the player has the option of performing an evade action, which would give it 1 stress token. Next, let's take a look at upgrade cards. The most obvious change is the size of the card, which is increased to match that of the ship cards, which I like. Oddly, they didn't make use of the extra space to increase the font, probably reserving it as a space to accommodate tokens for another change in 2nd edition, the introduction of charges, which controls the number of times certain upgrades can be used in a game. For example, the R5 Astromech can no longer be used each end phase, and it is instead limited to 2 charges that are spent by performing an action. Of course, there are other upgrades and abilities that allow you to reactivate a charge, so it definitely adds another layer to the strategy and decision making for players both in list building and during the game. Weapon upgrades have also been tweaked in 2nd edition. They now have explicit arcs shown on the card, same as the ships. This is especially important for turret weapons, so we'll add the turret arc to a ship, which then adds a turret arc indicator to the stand. In all cases, point cost is excluded, as that will be controlled by the evolving point system. And of course, there are now cards to boost Force Wielder's abilities. Let's now take a look at the stand inserts, which have also undergone changes. The biggest is the introduction of the new medium ship size, which reduces the footprint of some ships, for example the U-Wing. You may also notice that the stats have been removed and several dash marks have been added along with a darker shaded area at the front. The darker area is the front is to indicate the new bullseye arc, which is measured using a straight maneuver template, and when a target falls in that arc could trigger additional game effects, for example pilot abilities. Some weapon upgrades even require the target to be in the bullseye arc. The dash marks are to indicate the various firing arcs as well as a means of accommodating movement. The new templates each have a center line that can be used in the event of an overlap to align ships properly, especially when the overlap occurs on a bank or a turn. They also are used during barrel rolls. Unlike in first edition, all barrel rolls start by placing the distance 1 move template at the middle of the ship, aligned with the center line. The ship is then placed so that the template aligns flush with the back, aligned with the center line, or flush with the front. This limits the barrel roll considerably in comparison to first edition. Medium and larger ships are moved in a similar fashion, except that the one template is placed with its long edge touching the moving ship, so the barrel roll will be a lot shorter distance. Now, probably the most significant change in the game are the maneuver dials, especially the T-65 X-Wing, which is now much more maneuverable. They have also made a big tweak to the dial construction by presenting all maneuvers at once instead of having to continually cycle through the dial to see what maneuvers a ship can perform, which is a really great improvement. I think it's going to speed the game up a lot. And an aesthetic change that they did was to shift from green maneuvers to blue. This is most likely to help colorblind players differentiate the colors better, which is really cool of them to do that. And not to be left out, the damage deck has been reworked and there are several positive changes. First, the number of direct hits is reduced by 2. Second, all the repairs no longer require the rolling of dice and are automatic with an action. But the coolest change is the introduction of damage that requires players to pursue and continue to engage a vulnerable ship in order to maximize its effect. For example, fuel leak compromises a ship and can be easily repaired, but if an attacker can follow up their attack, they have the opportunity to strike a devastating blow. This to me adds another layer to the game and has a lot of cinematic flair, much more than just a simple direct hit, which throws 2 damage on there. Also, I highly recommend getting a copy of the promo damage deck if there's still some floating around out there, and it's just a cool piece of kit to have. Finally, the models themselves are seeing some serious changes by introducing even more articulation, something that was introduced in first edition with the U-Wing. And like the U-Wing, the ship's stats and abilities change slightly depending on their current posture. Of course, old models don't articulate, and they didn't include any markers to indicate the position of, like, say, the S-Walls and the X-Wing. So that could be a bit awkward at times, and may require some sort of indicator to avoid some confusion. Here's the loot from just one conversion kit, in this case the one from Scum and Villainy. As you can see, it's got plenty of goodies. Stands to convert medium ships, duplicates of the cards, the new dials, etc. You can see the exact contents online, so I won't go into any detail there. On the positive side, they seem to put a lot of thought into its construction, if you're a tournament player. It's clearly geared towards the competitive scene and getting those players back into competition as quickly as possible. For me, the kits fall way short of my needs, especially in regards to the number of X-Wings. I'm about 10 shy. There are, of course, several dials that I have left over and could likely kit bash with my scanner and some sticker paper. That's not to say I'm advocating a violation of any copyrighted material, far from it. I am well aware that any components made that way will only be viable in the comfort of my home, and it won't be usable in any official capacity. So that nixes any chance of me running any games using these components, if I were to go to a convention or something like that. So, it's not ideal for me. I do hope that there's something planned for the future that would allow for smaller, more focused conversions to at least give me the option of getting all my stuff over to the new version. There are also some other notable absences in the kits. For example, shield tokens with the exhausted side. Not too bad, most of us have plenty of shield tokens left over from first edition, but there aren't any force or charge tokens either. Nor are there ship numbers with the new target lock indicator. They do come in the starter set, but we found that there was not a lot, and there was barely enough to cover a 2-person game using ships beyond the X and ties in the starter set. It's possible they have a later release plan for a token pack, or maybe they intend to lean on third-party suppliers to fill the gaps. Time's going to tell on that, but it's definitely a noticeable deficiency. And of course, there are none of the quick build cards included. You have to download the PDF. A few weeks ago at Huracan, we had the opportunity to give 2nd edition a test run. I did find the T-65 to be a much more enjoyable ship to maneuver with that expanded dial. I also really liked Luke. The Force made him a much more resilient option to have on the table. Though my opponents, they were less thrilled with his Force ability, and they made several cracks about how aged my Cheddar was. Regardless, it was still a lot of fun to have everyone's favorite farm boy be viable in a dogfight again, and I never felt he was invincible. And I actually lost both games we played, so there you go. Also, all of us really enjoyed the Bullseye arc and found it challenging to set up and worth it when you finally did get somebody right in your crosshairs. So, if the intent was to get X-Wing to be more about dogfighting again, the dial rework is a positive step in that direction. That being said, there wasn't a whole lot that was all that groundbreaking. The structure of the game hasn't changed at all, and all the tweaks are pretty subtle, so it's going to take some time, I think, to really see how significantly impact the game. So, where does that leave me? I'm sort of the gray Jedi on this, as I can certainly see both sides. On the negative side, I can understand why the reaction has been so strong from some players. They invested a lot of money into the first edition, and then the upgrade path is not a small reinvestment, especially given that the conversion kits are not a good fit for a lot of people's collections. So it's almost like purchasing the game several times over again if you were to convert one-to-one. And frankly, I think it could have been handled a little better. And I truly hope there's some micro conversions in development, or at least being up for consideration. I couldn't find anything to confirm that may be the case beyond rumor, so we shall see. Maybe like a booster pack that they could even send to retailers or something like that to strap on the old product, but we'll see. Anyway, on FFG side, I can understand why they had to go with the second edition. A few years ago, at the in-flight report at Gen Con, I remember the CEO saying they had no idea the game was going to get as big as it has. Now, we could argue all day long it doesn't take a forced vision to see this game blowing up. But I didn't put my money at risk developing the game, so I'm willing to cut this guy some slack. That being said, they really miscalculated the jump to hyperspace right from the beginning, I feel. You can see that clearly in the later waves. They felt like they were struggling to give the new ships their own feel while not upsetting the meta too much. And they also seem to be pushing iconic ships and characters to the background, which is something they tried to correct along the way, and they did a pretty decent job of, but they're really trying to correct with this new edition, which is cool. And if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, the idea is that they're trying to get those X-Wings and TIEs back into the leading role and make the other ships the supporting cast, which is another thing I can really put my credits behind. So at the end of the day, I don't think this is going to be the end of the game. I think it's actually going to be the sequel that is worthy of the name. Which is great, because that's not something we've been getting from every one of the new movies. Last Jedi. So, for the tournament players, this upgrade is going to be a no-brainer. They will likely only need what's in the conversion kits, and will immediately latch onto those subtle changes. So the biggest selling point with them is going to be, too, is with the squadrons, how they're built. Having that constantly evolving and adapting point system is going to prevent the power listers and allow the devs to work new releases into the game much more smoothly and keep the competitive edge sharp. On the other side, this edition is likely going to be a hard sell to casual gamers right now. First edition is a complete and well-established game, so there isn't a lot of incentive to convert. Plus, the editions are similar enough that a mixed community or group of first edition and second edition players will have no issue bouncing back and forth, depending on who's putting the toys on the table. Now, that's not to say there isn't reason for casual gamers to convert. The constant reevaluation of points and the threat level for the quick build method of squadron building is going to be a fantastic way to throw together a quick and interesting game. Also, FFG will be adding the Clone Wars into the game, and there's a strong likelihood of some ships coming out of the new Resistance animated series, which is going to be a strong lure to get those first edition players to eventually convert, even if it's a bit reluctantly at first. Another encouraging note to the casual players is that because the components are so similar, there's a lot of room for some creativity. For example, using the dials from the first edition X-Wing alongside the second edition dials could be a cinematic way of representing rookie pilots, damaged ships, or some other way to explain that how the older dials have the fewer maneuvers. So, while I started off this emotional journey on the dark side, I have shifted closer towards the light. Though I am not a Jedi yet, I'm definitely not willing to push players towards the new edition, but I'm encouraged by what I've seen thus far, and I believe the game could be taking a nice big step towards exceeding even the high standard that they've set for themselves. So FFG may not have to define my lack of faith to disturbing for too long. Of course, we would love to hear your thoughts and experiences about second edition, so leave us a comment here or head on over to our Facebook page. And until next time, thank you for watching. May the Force be with you, and game well. Game very well. And don't forget, it's a dark time for YouTube creators. So hit that like and subscribe. Help us, loyal viewers. You are our only hope.